Let's establish the rules of engagement for podcast wars.
Okay.
Like, I feel like if you want to have a good podcast war, there should be a certain list of criteria that you got to hit these certain marks.
Okay.
For it to be truly entertaining.
Right. And what's performance? Performance is one.
Mm-hmm. No subliminals.
It's got to be direct shots.
It's got to be direct shots because nigga, this is a podcast war.
True.
I'm talking to
I respect
you.
that. Yeah.
Well, wouldn't you say what he did was kind of a subliminal? That window shot, and you kind of had to know what it was when he did the research and made it that much crazier.
Oh yeah, it was definitely subliminal.
It was a really direct subliminal though.
It was. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, because once the image is in front of you, you're like, who else could he be talking about?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
I changed my mind. I like subliminals now because it's more fun.
Yeah, because
the Redditors get to go and get the clues.
That's true.
You get to be
it's like you involve everybody.
Yeah, and we can't forget that like the Joe Budden episode that went the craziest when he was like, to whom it may concern.
Facts.
You remember that was like that was legendary, and he wasn't being direct. It was subliminal, but it was direct subliminal.
Right.
It's got to be direct subliminal. It's like a subgenre of subliminal.
It's like it's for the people who are like in the space or who's paying real attention.
Right.
It's like you gonna know who I'm talking about if you're paying attention.
Facts.
You eventually have to address each other directly though.
Yes.
Good.
At some point,
it's always better when it starts off subliminal, so we get to pick up the pieces and do our journalism.
Yeah,
but then eventually, you got to really punch this nigga in the mouth.
Facts.
Now I know I'm kind of skipping to the end, but do you think
metaphorically speaking,
do you think that all podcast wars have to end with a show collab?
Yeah. At a certain point,
y'all have to get on camera together.
We can't be yelling at each other online. It's
Right.
always better when we in the room. I'm looking right at you. And I'm talking directly to you.
I was about to say, because the phrase podcast war has me like shaking. That sounds so corny. I can't even like get into that. Podcast war? Like we're arguing with niggas like a podcast war?
It's a debate.
I think this is going to be the summer for it though. Because it's like, we talked about it a little bit. I think this is going to be the summer for it because it's just like, I don't know if it was the complex list that put a battery in everybody's back, but it's just like, Flacco was kind of on that type of energy. Like, we can violate each other. Like, I'll violate you.
You see what I'm saying?
Academics is on that.
Going on.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It feels like there's a
game.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like all podcasts are trying to enter into this heavy competitive space right now.
Because you got to understand, we're talking to rappers who have faked beefs in the past. Like, that's famous thing. That's true. Famous rappers. Like, I think 50 Cent, he dissed 𝙼𝚃, and he had saw him in like Bangladesh and was like, nigga, why you ain't respond to me? Like, we could have been in the newspaper in South Korea.
Exactly.
Like, you won't know how the game works.
Yeah.
Stupid.
So 50 was pissed at 𝙼𝚃 for not responding.
So they're taking that same exact game.
Yeah.
Maybe subconsciously too. They don't even know they're doing it.
True.
Because it's just in them.
And I know some people were trying to like, I was watching like one or two YouTube videos. I can't remember what the channel was, but they were trying to make it seem like Gilly was like, now, Joe, be careful. Don't play with Gilly. But, bro, like...
in a violent manner?
Yeah, like, because he's...
pissed.
Bro, I don't think anybody... I could be completely wrong because we haven't seen it yet. But I don't think anybody is at the point where podcast beef is going to turn violent. The only time we've seen that happen is with Tax. Yeah. And that was literally it. It was early in the podcast space.
And he wasn't beefing with the podcast.
And he wasn't beefing with the podcast.
So it don't even count.
So, yeah, that's true. We can't even qualify that. Yeah, so...
That complex list was definitely the catalyst for all of this because
for all this,
before we were technically competing, but there was no metric. Like, we can be like, nigga, I got more ads than you. And then you can be like Joe Budden and just spin it and be like, nigga, I don't like ads.
Okay, and speaking of ads and that, one of the other qualifiers should be actual quality of podcast. And one of the biggest things that fans complained about with the Gilly, if we're talking quality of podcast, who y'all taking? Let's just get that out the way.
I'm taking Joe.
$1 million worth of game or the Joe Budden podcast?
I don't consider what Gilly does a podcast.
Okay.
Why is that?
Yeah, it's definitely a pod, ain't it?
I don't know. It's something different.
It don't feel.
It's like
I kind of understand where you're coming from.
Different. Like, so I would have to go to Joe.
Okay.
What's different about it?
It's just something different. Like, it's a podcast, but
it doesn't really put you in.
It's more like
a podcast space.
Is what one generation. 𝙼𝚃 is what he does a podcast.
I see what you're saying. Okay. I get what you're saying. It feels like it feels like a pop-up podcast. Like how somebody might have a clothing pop-up shop. but it feels like a pop-up podcast. Like
podcast is so vague. Like
yeah,
you
it
can,
really is.
it's just talking on a mic.
All the
people are putting live
podcast
streams
is a
under the
means of
pod-
distribution.
Especially if you see a roadcaster with colorful buttons, that's like your podcast.
A podcast is a means of distribution. The Breakfast Club comes out in podcast format, but it's a radio show.
So do those streaming shows. They'll put them on the podcast audio.
There's plenty of podcasts that are really just talk shows. It's just in podcast packaging.
Yeah,
it just comes
or it's
out
on the podcast app.
Literally, it's in the package.
It's in that genre.
Like that one black dude, he has an HBO show. Shout out to him. I forgot his name. He's bald.
Bald black guy with an
HBO show.
There's a couple of those.
Wow,
probably.
I forgot his name, but shout out to him.
Shouldn't be that many, right?
But I would choose Joe Budden for sure, way before.
Yeah, I'm going Joe.
As an actual podcast, any podcast that is guest based is not gonna hold up in competition with anything else.
Not necessarily.
Because bro, all right. So imagine if you was like, who's gonna win in a 1v1? This playmaker or the leading scorer in the NBA?
Right.
When you a guest-based podcast, you doing interviews. It's cool, but you're throwing lives. You're not gonna score.
You kind of putting guest-based podcasts in the forms of like,
but it's vague.
You can't be the greatest rapper if you've had any help with any bars.
It's like that.
Yeah,
it's like that. John Stockton isn't in the conversation for the best scorer ever.
But what
Because
about
neither is Magic Johnson? These niggas was woo-wop and there was
right.
But what about like a Joe Rogan? Like he has reoccurring guests that like are his friends. You know what I mean? He's not interviewing them every time they come on.
He's done a lot dolo though.
And like he has years of work when he's just like just talking to Jamie.
Well,
like,
and to be either Jamie or like
Joey Diaz.
Brandon Schwab, Joey D. Like even though it's a guest, they're so regular, they're not guests.
And that's the
you know what I'm saying?
Distinction. Maybe like between, $1 million worth of game and Joe Rogan. It's like they're both guest based, but like
some guests are there so much they're essentially just substitute hosts.
Not even that. Joe Rogan has more interesting guests.
Yeah,
$1 million worth of game has the same guest
style of guest
every week. It's the same person with a different chain,
They've had
a different song,
a
different hat.
I'm gonna tell you the biggest thing too. We can kind of get into this. This Gilly responded to Joe's initial like your little window thing. When that money slow up, you want a podcast beef, and then I ain't like your little ad speech. I took it personally.
Let's talk about that.
The advertisements.
Is having advertisements on your podcast selling your ass for cheap?
It depends on
not
the
if you're getting a
ads.
bag from the ads.
No.
And then also
selling your bag for selling. No.
No, you can have good ads.
I think that's only a positive thing.
Because that's Joe Budden's point. He's on like the more high horse of like podcasting should be pure.
Right,
it should just be
ad free.
This is not a TV show.
Right.
We're not here to make money. We're here to entertain you.
I think that is his point, but his point I think is more so about what kind of bag you're bringing in.
What type of ads?
Yeah, what type of ads and what kind of brag.
Like if you're bringing a pamper ad in.
Yeah,
like
if you don't have control over what the ad is,
correct.
It's gonna be on your show.
And if you didn't negotiate your terms the way like it is, like you get this space, but like I can do whatever I want with this shit at the end of the day.
Like, have y'all seen like a video, any video, whatever, and it will be that stupid game ad. It's like a
oh my god, yes, I know
you
exactly what you're talking
download,
about,
you
bro.
get a free character.
Yes,
that's
bro.
selling your soul.
Yeah, okay.
Whatever that's selling your soul.
I heard that some of those bags be the heaviest ones. Those gaming bags, gambling bags, tobacco bags, nicotine bags.
Logan Paul,
crazy.
Logan Paul gets he's been called out for like gambling, like getting sponsored by
I'm gonna
gambling
tell y'all right
things.
now, if somebody approaches us with a gambling deal, we're taking it.
Yeah, I'm about to say.
You're talking to a person who would sell crack to a pregnant woman.
Oh my god.
Of course. Hey, Keith, you want to shoot some dice?
Oh my god. They don't understand the context.
The context is wild, but
the context speaks for itself. We've obviously had a discussion where you've mentioned you would sell crack to a pregnant bitch.
I did not. It was completely
for the right
different.
price.
Nigga, for money, yes. It doesn't matter what the price is, however much the rocks are.
But I think with the largest issue, they can talk advertisements outside of not having control over what type of advertisements are on your thing.
Yeah.
Gilly's advertisements are the worst in podcast history, I'm almost sure.